Right now, true crime fans are glued to developments happening in Portland, Oregon. That's where law enforcement have discovered a link between 4 women found dead in and around the city over the past 6 months. Officials say there is a person of interest, however, they haven't released any details beyond that. And back east, police just arrested an architect and married father of 2 following a decade-long investigation into the notorious Long Island serial killer. Rex Heuermann is now charged in 3 murders, and he's the prime suspect in a 4th. And now investigators are using DNA evidence to see if he's connected to other cold cases from the 90s and 2000s. Well, long before murders in Portland and Long Island, a former boxer terrorized women in the Midwest and across the South. Samuel Little eventually confessed to killing 93 women over the course of 4 decades. My next guest is a New York Times bestselling author and the journalist who exposed Little. She wrote about their unusual relationship in her new book, Behold the Monster. Welcome to New Day, Jillian Lauren.
Thank you so much for having me.
Just reading that title, Behold the Monster, is chilling. I mean, here in Seattle, we're familiar with Green River Killer, Gary Ridgway, and then Ted Bundy, who had victims that lived in this area. But who was Samuel Little?
It's interesting because Gary Ridgway was considered the most prolific serial killer in American history, by the FBI standards. And Sam has exceeded has exceeded that. And I knew he had murdered 3 women. He was convicted in 2014. I was interviewing the detective on a different case, and I asked her, "What are you the most proud of in your career?" And she said, "Well, I'm proud of everything." Her name is Detective Mitzi Roberts. And she said, "I'm proud of everything, but I caught this serial killer once, and that was pretty cool." And I was like, "What?" I missed the whole story. And so I went home. She said, he was convicted for these 3 murders, but I believe that he killed many, many more women across the country. He was a traveler, a transient, and she just couldn't mobilize interest because the reason that Sam lived, you haven't heard of Sam Little, he's not one of these names, like these very familiar names, is because he kept to the shadows. I mean, he had a 40-decade killing career.
So that's
where
why
every other day he was in jail for a petty theft.
So they weren't connecting him to all of these. They were just thinking it was other people killing these victims.
and they were cold cases, and so from the 80s, you really have to care to follow up, and it's hard to get people to care about victims who seem marginalized,
and that's where his victims were. Which case finally landed him behind bars then?
There was a Department of Justice grant that the cold case special section in LA got in the late 90s, I believe, and then used and started to screen old evidence that now that we have DNA fingerprinting, they start to screen old cold case evidence. This hit comes back, this guy Samuel Little. Guadalupe Apodaca. And then there was another hit. And it was the same MO. He was a strangler. And so once they had those 2 cases connected, they started looking for him.
Okay.
They're like, we got to get this guy off the streets. He's still out there.
And you actually talked to him, communicated with him in prison. Tell me about that.
Well, so after the... excuse me. After I talked to the detective, I said, "You know what? I think this other case I'm working on, I'm putting it on the shelf. What if he was claiming his innocence? I am just an unlucky guy. I just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. I was railroaded."
Right.
And I said, I called my editor at New York Magazine. I said, I think I have the serial killer that no one's heard of. an underreported case, and it might be really significant. If I could put some heat on it, then people
So
might
you started focusing on just that case.
Right, and I said, I'm going to do this. I'm going to go in and get this guy talking. Like, that's what I do.
Why do you think he opened up to you?
I think it was a matter of timing in some ways, and also, I just was relentless in this. Like, as I started to get more and more involved and read about these women and talk to their families and feel like they were so lost and so ignored, that,
And you were focusing on him. So
yeah, so I was like, I'm gonna get him to talk. So I started to write him letters.
Yeah.
I got my visitor clearance. I went in, and sat in a men's maximum security prison. And he was 78. So, it was a matter of convincing him just to start talking. I flattered him. I did everything and to get him to talk. And when he did, it was like a bucket of ice water dropped over my head. I couldn't believe it. I was like, I actually did it.
Did the information that he started sharing with you, did that help with other cold cases?
Yes. So what I did not know was that the FBI was on this just when I was. Like, they were in there talking to him. There's actually a Texas Ranger. I have a great big tall cowboy.
At the same time that you were...
Right. So we were, we kind of ran into the same serial killer at the same time. And yes, the details that I was getting, because I was having different kinds of conversations with him. It wasn't just about, I'm not a detective. It was about, who is this person and why? And how did this happen?
We're looking at some of his victims here. What's next in the quest for justice for Little's victims? Because there's so many, and as you said, on the margins.
What's next is that it is an ongoing investigation. There were 93 confessions officially. I was able to get odd details that helped law enforcement to start to identify these cases. Sometimes he'd say to me, I left her naked upside down in a barrel, and that detail
would help.
They were able to connect a case in Omaha.
Thank you so much. Oh, we could go on forever. We can't, but I wish we could. If you'd like to hear more from Jillian Lauren, and I know I would, she has a book event tonight, Wednesday, July 19th at 7 p.m. at Elliott Bay Book Company. Thank you.